Quick question for you. If someone promised you safe, steady, risk-free returns on your money, no matter what the stock market was doing, would you take that deal? Most of us would, right? Because who doesn't want financial peace of mind? Well, that's exactly the promise Bernie Madoff made. He wasn't some sketchy stranger calling you out of the blue. He wasn't running his business out of a basement. No, he was one of the most respected men on Wall Street, a financial pioneer, a former chairman of NASDAQ, and yet, behind that polished reputation, he was running the largest Ponzi scheme in history. We're talking more than $65 billion stolen. Not from a handful of greedy investors, but from thousands of everyday people, charities, universities, even celebrities. In this video, we're going to dig deep into Bernie Madoff's story. Who he was, how he pulled off his scam for decades, why so many people fell for it, and the shocking way it all came crashing down. So, let's rewind the clock and start from the beginning. Bernard Lawrence Madoff, better known as Bernie, wasn't born into the wealthy elite of Wall Street. He grew up in Queens, New York, in a middle-class Jewish family. His dad was a plumber who later tried and failed at running his own finance business. His mom worked as a homemaker, though she also dabbled in finance. In other words, Bernie wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He had ambition, and he wanted more. In 1960, when he was just 22 years old, he founded his own firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. He started small, really small. He only had about $5,000, which he earned from working as a lifeguard and installing sprinklers on the side. But here's the thing about Bernie. He was smart, charming, and ambitious. He started trading what were called penny stocks, low-value investments that most big players ignored, and he gained a reputation for being reliable and innovative. Over the years, his firm grew. By the 1970s and 1980s, Bernie wasn't just another trader. He became a big deal on Wall Street. He was one of the early pioneers of electronic trading and even helped launch the NASDAQ stock exchange. Eventually, he even served as chairman of NASDAQ, not once, but 3 times. To the outside world, Bernie Madoff was a financial genius. He was respected. He was admired. He wore nice suits, attended the right parties, and moved in all the elite social circles. People trusted him. He was the kind of guy who seemed like he'd never steer you wrong. And let me ask you this. If a man with that kind of reputation offered to invest your money, would you even think twice? Most people didn't. And that's where the story really begins. So, how exactly did Bernie Madoff pull off a scam that lasted for decades? The answer: he ran a Ponzi scheme. If you're not familiar with that term, here's a simple breakdown. Imagine you're throwing a dinner party. Instead of actually cooking food, you sneak into your neighbor's house and steal their dinner to serve to your guests. Everyone thinks you're a great chef because the food tastes amazing. But here's the problem. You don't actually know how to cook, and eventually you're going to run out of neighbors to steal from. That's exactly what Bernie did with money. He promised investors steady returns, usually around 10 to 12% a year. That's not flashy enough to look suspicious, but it's high enough to feel like a golden opportunity. On paper, investors saw their accounts growing. Every month they got statements showing profits. If they wanted to withdraw money, they could, and Bernie paid them out. But here's the truth. Bernie wasn't actually investing their money. He wasn't buying stocks. He wasn't running some brilliant strategy. Instead, he was taking money from new investors and using it to pay older ones. The rest he pocketed. It was all an illusion, backed up by fake account statements and phony trade confirmations. And get this, he even had a name for his so-called strategy. He told people he was using something called a split strike conversion. Sounds complicated, right? Sounds legit. But it was totally made up. No trades were happening. Meanwhile, his offices were carefully staged. The trading floor looked busy, full of people working phones and computers. But the back office? That's where the scam lived. There, a small team of loyal employees printed fake trade records and doctored account statements. And because Bernie actually paid out money when people asked, the scheme looked real. People bragged about their returns. Word spread. More and more investors wanted in. Let me ask you, if you got a statement every month showing nothing but profits year after year, would you stop to question it? Or would you celebrate and tell your friends about the genius managing your money? Here's the million-dollar question. Why did so many smart, wealthy, and experienced investors believe Bernie Madoff? There are three big reasons. First, trust. Bernie wasn't some outsider. He was a Wall Street insider, a former NASDAQ chairman. He was respected by regulators, politicians, and bankers. People thought, if Bernie's involved, it must be safe. Second, exclusivity. Bernie didn't take just anyone's money. In fact, sometimes he turned investors away, at least at first. He made his fund sound like a private club, something you had to be invited into. And the harder it was to get in, the more people wanted in. It's human nature. When something seems scarce, it feels valuable. And third, consistency. Most investments go up and down. Some years are great, some are terrible. But Bernie's returns looked boringly safe. No big swings, just steady, modest profits. And for a lot of people, boring was exactly what they wanted. This combination, trust, exclusivity, and consistency, was powerful. It fooled not just everyday people, but also celebrities, hedge funds, universities, and charities. We're talking Steven Spielberg's charitable foundation, actor Kevin Bacon, TV host Larry King. Even major banks and international investors handed him their money. And here's the scary part. It wasn't always greed driving them. It was social proof. If your neighbor, your boss, or Steven Spielberg's foundation was trusting Bernie Madoff, wouldn't you? But every Ponzi scheme has an expiration date. Eventually, the money going out will exceed the money coming in. For Bernie, that moment came in 2008. When the global financial crisis hit, investors panicked. They wanted their money back. Billions of dollars in redemption requests poured in, far more than Bernie could ever cover. For decades, he had managed to keep up the illusion. But now, too many people wanted their money at the same time. And remember, there was no money. It was gone. In December 2008, Bernie finally admitted the truth to his sons, Mark and Andrew. They were horrified. They went straight to the authorities. On December 11th, Bernie Madoff was arrested by the FBI. The financial world was in shock. How could someone so respected, so trusted, have pulled off a fraud of this size for this long? In 2009, Bernie stood in court and admitted everything. He pled guilty to 11 federal felonies, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. The judge sentenced him to the maximum, 150 years in prison. Just imagine the scene. People in the courtroom, some crying, others furious, watching the man who'd ruined their lives admit that it had all been a lie. The fallout was catastrophic. Around 37,000 people in 136 countries were victims. Some lost their life savings. Some lost retirement funds. Charities were wiped out overnight. The financial damage was staggering, but the emotional toll was just as bad. Families were ruined. Friendships destroyed. Some people were so devastated that they took their own lives. Even one of Bernie's own sons, Mark, died by suicide on the 2-year anniversary of Bernie's arrest. Over time, the government and court-appointed trustees were able to recover about $14 billion of the lost money, but that was only a fraction of the total. For many victims, the damage could never be undone. Bernie Madoff spent the rest of his life in prison, where he died in 2021 at the age of 82. But the shadow of his scheme still lingers. So, what can we learn from Bernie Madoff's scam? Number 1. If an investment sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Number 2. Even the smartest, richest, most connected people can be fooled. Don't assume that because someone is famous or powerful, they can't be wrong. And number 3. Always ask questions. Don't let reputation or social proof blind you. Demand transparency. At its core, Bernie's story isn't just about money. It's about trust. Once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Bernie Madoff was simply a master manipulator who fooled everyone? Or do you think the red flags were obvious and people just ignored them? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of one of the biggest scams in history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into scams and financial events of the past, and I'll see you in the next one.